Oh, thank you for letting me come in today. You're a beautiful class. Oh, I was so pretty like you. Oh, and you look like my Boaz. Strong jaw. If I knew my line, you'd have a pretty and right girlfriend, I tell you what. Oh, but I'm getting ahead of myself, so far ahead of myself. My word. They're always telling me that Rahab started at the beginning of the story, and I'm like, but the middle's the best part. I'm sorry. I'll pull it in. I'm working on it. But no, yeah, I was pretty like you. The good skin, it'll go away. Cherish the good skin. Good skin. Yes, anyway, I was so pretty that people would come from all around to this little tiny poor farm town just to see how pretty I was. Or at least that was the impression I was under, because I was about 8 or 10, and people coming from everywhere to look at the pretty Rahab. Oh, men mostly. It was very confusing. We were poor, my family, very poor. And not the kind of poor you have now where it's charming. No, we were poor, but we never realized it. No, we were poor and we were very, very aware of how poor we were. So it was very important that as the oldest daughter, I married well. But you know, when you're a poor farm girl, not that many well-off men really want to get married. It's unfortunate, I've found. And in my time, and in my place, the oldest daughter was in charge of all the debt. And if you can't get a rich, handsome suitor, then you really can't pay off the debts the way you think. And that is how I ended up in the business. Now, originally I worked for somebody else. And that was very common in my day, that the dad would sell you. And I don't blame my dad. I did it. Happily is the wrong word, but I knew I had to take care of my family. That was always my highest priority. It's still my highest priority, is to take care of my own, always. And so, the first time I was terrified, and I figured after that I was good. I was pretty, why not? But I didn't like the working for other people. It doesn't work well, and they take a bunch of your money, and it's terrible. So I would save and save. I was so careful. My family was fed, no other money went out. And in a time, and not to brag, even though I could brag if I wanted, just in this one day. In a time when most women couldn't own a goat, I owned a house. Well, most biblical translations right now call it an inn. Okay, you can call it an inn if it makes you feel better. It was lovely. There was a couple of little rooms. There was always oil. It was a good house. It was in the wall of Jericho. Not exactly the most discreet place to run a business, if you know the business I'm in, but it worked. I had good clients, smart men, and I realize now that I found favor in ways that I shouldn't have, because the Lord was with me even then, because it was important that I have that house in the wall. These political leaders, they would come to me, and all of a sudden they were getting so nervous. The way I think of it is they were terrified. They were just about wetting themselves because there was a nation gearing up to attack us. And they were not a nation to be trifled with. They had taken down kings and cities, and with nothing. They're nothing. They have no crops. They have no anything worth having. And everyone is terrified because of the God that's with them. Now, as a prostitute, you meet a lot of other prostitutes. I knew a lot of temple prostitutes, and I knew that our God had nothing on this God. I had never seen him go in a cloud of smoke or a pillar of fire. I had never heard of things like that happening. But this God, that was his daily routine. Every day before them. Every night before them. No God does that except this God. Now that's a God worth being scared of. So when the opportunity came a little later, I was in my inn, and some men came, and that's not that unusual, obviously, but they showed up and they wander in, and they just want food. I ran a pretty good side business. I can cook a little. I mean, you don't get to be where I am in life without having a second job of some kind. You gotta do something during the day. So they came and they ate, and they were perfect gentlemen. Oh, and one, Salmon, he was attractive and sweet. Neither of them said anything to me the way other men talk to me. They never considered. They didn't look at me in a way that made me feel like a prostitute. They looked at me like the woman that was serving them food. They looked at me gratefully because I let them, because I was showing them even this small kindness. They were Israeli, and it was obvious. And so when I heard the guards were going around looking for Israelites, I immediately knew that these are my Israelites. And they were sweet, and I couldn't stand the thought of what would happen to them. Plus, they were already here. Like, let's be real, nobody's gonna believe I didn't know. So, I shoo them upstairs, and they hide under all the flax on the roof, and the guards come up, and of course I've met the guards before. Hey, how's the wife? Oh, spies, no. Oh, they were Israel. Oh, actually I might have seen them. They were here earlier. But no, I sent them on their way. They got out of the city before the gates closed. Don't worry about it. You shouldn't. I mean, you might want to worry about it, but in any case, they're not inside the city anymore. So they asked, which way? And I was like, well, I mean, which way would you go? So off they went. I snuck back up to the roof and I sat down with them and I said, I will not go back on this. When you go from here, you will be safe either way. But what I want from you is to keep my family safe. Just as I have spared your life, please spare ours. Once again, family always is going to be number one. And so that was all that mattered. Jericho is going to fall apart eventually anyway, but my family is going to be forever. Well, I mean, it turned out that way. Anyway, so yes, we will. So I lowered them out of the window on a big long rope, and they say, the only way we can do it is if we know which house is yours. Like they wouldn't remember, police. But anyway, big long red rope, we'll leave it out the window because he says to. Salmon, he says to. And I would do pretty much anything for Salmon at this point. And they skedaddle on off, and I tell them 3 days, wait them out for 3 days so that you're sure that they won't find you. And they go back and they tell their leader, Salmon told me afterward, they told their leader exactly what I told them. They're terrified of us. They have no idea what to do, and they have no idea what we're going to do. But they told me that if my whole family wasn't in the house, they couldn't be held accountable. So for the first time in so long, all of my family was together. My business is one of isolation. You can't really have like sisters and brothers, moms and dads running around while you're doing what I do. So I hadn't seen them in ages. I just sent them the money. So really, I know that this is going to sound strange, but in my world, even if my house had fallen like the rest of Jericho, it would have been with all my family around me, and that would have been a little bit better. But I knew that this God who was faithful to his people would be faithful to me. And so, when the Israelites started walking around Jericho, I was confused. I watched from my window, just like everybody else did. I had a better seat, because I lived in the wall. And every day I would watch Salmon go by, and he would wave, because he wasn't allowed to talk. I found out afterwards. I was confused at the time. And they walked, every day they walked, and I was, this seems like a bad battle strategy, but, you know, okay. All of a sudden, the 7th day, they all stop. They look at us, he looks at me, and then they just let out a scream, and all around my house, everywhere except my house, the walls collapse. Just rubble on the ground, everywhere. No one has any idea what's happening. The rafters shake, but we're intact. No one's hurt, no one left, thank goodness. And then, here he comes, Salmon, my knight in shining armor, just as I was his. And he picks up my little sister, and that was the cutest thing I saw until I picked up Boaz, let me tell you. And we go with them to their camp. And of course, we're from Jericho, we can't live in an Israelite camp yet. No one's circumcised, no one's ready, we don't know how to live this life. So they set us up this sweet little encampment outside theirs, and the whole family's there. And I gotta say, it was probably the best time we had had in maybe my whole life. We were fed, we were watered, we were with a group of people who the God of Israel protected. There was no danger in it, and they were kind to us. Salmon would come visit more and more. Eventually, the men in my house got circumcised, and I learned how to cook Israeli food, which is just not as good, I'm sorry. And we became quite an item, Salmon and I, and eventually he came and he showed up with all manner of things, and I was, why do you have so much stuff with you? That's kind of random. And he's like, oh, sorry, Rahab, I'm not here to see you. And I was like, rude. Fine then. And he said, no, I'm here to see your dad. And he asked for my hand in marriage. And it was easily the best day of my life, by a mile. He was so sweet and gentle, and he didn't care where I had been and what I had done. All I knew was that I loved God more than I loved him, but I loved him enough to save his life when I didn't even know it. And eventually, we were part of the Israelite nation, and I had my first baby. And his name's Boaz, and he's cuter than any kid you'll ever have because he's mine. And he's perfect. And if you have a kid, you're going to say the exact same thing, cuter than any kid that's ever been. You'll see. But he was perfect. And I looked at him, and it just filled me with awe that this God would bring back around the thing about me that was the most shameful. Like, the things I had done with my body were not at all in line with the Israelite values. And yet the thing I had made of my body could not have been more so. He was perfect. And every time I saw him, all I could think about was the miracle that he was. The way that my life had come around full circle. And the thing about me that used to be the thing that everyone talked about in hushed voices. Well, now he was so well. He was right there, a product of this part of me. And he was perfect, he was darling. And he grew up to be kind and sweet. And when the Israelites settled down, I was a farmer my whole young life. So Salmon and I did very well. We set up a big estate. We had plenty of food and fields and grain. For the first time in my life, I was unashamed of how my family got fed at night. And it was beautiful. And Salmon grew up like that. And of course he got the edited version, but I was never unafraid to tell him what God had done for me, for our family, that he was a product of truly and honestly a miracle. And he grew up kind, and he grew up smart. And when a little foreign girl came from another place, her name was Ruth, and he was open to foreign women. Of course he was. We cooked better. And he saw Mom and her a little bit, because she was smart and funny. Not to toot my horn, but they got married eventually. He let her pick from his field because he knew what it was like. He had grown up understanding what it was like to not have much. Not that he did, but that we did. So he picked Ruth. Out of all, he had options. Handsome, smart, rich, but he picked Ruth. And I have never been so proud of a choice because she was perfect for him. And our line has been amazing because of it. That could have been enough. God could have stopped there, and it would have been the most amazing thing any woman could ever hope for. But he didn't. Our line kept going. And eventually, Salmon begat Boaz, who begat Obed, who begat David. Like, the king of Israel came from the whore of Jericho. That's true. That's what God did. That's what God can do. And after David, who begat Mary and Joseph and Jesus. So now, this God who redeemed my life, who took nothing and made a lineage out of it, he does that for everyone else. Through somebody that I was involved in making happen. I can't imagine anything more beautiful than that. That this part of me that was so abused and so broken led to so many people not being able to be abused or broken anymore. To think that that is what the God of Israel does and who he is. I've never been so glad to hide somebody on my roof. I've never regretted any decision once. And I wouldn't have had a roof because women didn't own property. They just got married. I had a husband, not a roof. So while I'm not glad that I made the choices I made or that the things that happened to me, looking over what has happened since, I can't say that I wouldn't do it all again in a heartbeat. That was a lot of years of shame and a lot of years of suffering. But what has come of it is incomprehensible because you've already outlived your past. But every single day is a new future with the God that we serve, the God that I serve, the God that chose nothing from Jericho and made a line worth being in. Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to represent this wonderful woman who I can't even help but love. Lord, I pray that this message means as much to somebody else as it means to me every time I say it and every time I think it. Lord, I pray that you would use it however you see fit. Lord, anything that was from me, please take away. But anything that was from you, let it just sink in. Lord, we thank you so much for the opportunity to come here and the opportunity to be heard, Lord. Because Rahab never probably got to be, and now she will. Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Good job, Brittany.